Hello everyone and welcome to Kim's Cozy Corner. We are back for part 2 of the different seeds that I'll be starting this season. For the tomato varieties, there are a total of 60 tomato varieties that I'm going to do a review on today with you. So you might as well get comfortable, get you a coffee, whatever you need to get to prepare for this video that we're getting ready to go through. I am going to divide the tomatoes up into several different groups. And most of these tomatoes, y'all, I couldn't part ways with. So yes, I grow a lot of tomatoes in my outdoor growing space, and I don't have that much room. So I usually only grow 1 or 2 plants of everything that I have. And since I don't have that much space, I usually have one GreenStalk vertical planter that has nothing but tomatoes in it. And that gives me 24 tomatoes by itself because I do 4 tiers. There's 6 plants per tier. That's 24 plants right there. And then I grow in raised beds and every now and then in pots. But let's go through these tomatoes. The first group of tomatoes that we're going to talk about are going to be what I call cherry style tomatoes. For the cherry style tomatoes, y'all, they grow like weeds. It's one of the things I struggle with my cherry tomatoes is that you don't need but 1 plant of every variety, and you really don't need that many varieties or they will take over the garden. So be careful with your cherry tomatoes. Most cherry tomatoes are indeterminate tomatoes, which means that they grow and grow, they vine and vine, and they keep going until the weather or disease takes it out. And all of the tomato, double checking here, yes, all of my cherry style tomatoes are indeterminate tomatoes, which is most of them. The first tomato that I want to talk about that I'm growing this year is the black cherry. And here's a picture of the black cherry tomato. It's 75 days to harvest, and I am definitely growing the black cherry. It's super sweet. If you leave it on the vine long enough, the skins get thinner. If you try to pick it too early when it's still firm, I find the skins to be a little tough. I am definitely growing this tomato, but I will not be starting any seeds. There's no reason to start seeds because they are growing wild in my garden right now. I planted 1 of these plants, but they came up in like 5 different places, and I was overrun with black cherry tomatoes. The black cherry tomato also produced longer than any other tomato. It was more vigorous than any other, and I'm talking cherry style tomatoes. When everything else was dying, this one was still pumping out tomatoes to the point where I just stopped picking them. I didn't want another black cherry tomato. So yes, we're growing it and no need to plant it because it grows wild in my garden. The next one that we're going to grow, and I got some new ones this year, y'all. I'm doing some new things that I've never done before, and I'm really excited about those. Got them kind of mixed in here. Another one that we're going to do is called Supernova. This Supernova is a new one for me this year. And yes, it's indeterminate. It's more grape shaped tomatoes. It's a grape shape. It has little gold flecks in it. It's a luminous red, tiny Roma-like tomato with yellow streaks. It's not gorgeous on the outside, but the inside, it has a marbling interior. The tomato is perfect for snacking for its compact size. So it says it's a Roma-like tomato, but it's tiny. It's more like a grape style tomato. And it's got little red flecks. So that one is going to be new to us. I hope it stays small like the grape-sized tomatoes and doesn't become a Roma-sized tomato. But it's got those yellow streaks in it. That one's new to us this year. We're going to do the black strawberry. And this one's not new. I love this. I never plant more than 1 of these because they usually do really well. The first set of fruit that comes in with this black strawberry are usually pretty big. I mean, they're smaller than salad tomatoes, but they're bigger than your standard cherry tomato. And then as the season go on, they get smaller and smaller. That's happened to me 2 years in a row now. But they have this beautiful color with some reds and some purples, and it's kind of like a little purple on the shoulders. Beautiful, black strawberry. This next one is a new one to me. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce it. I was looking at it, I got ready to do it. I'm not gonna do it because I'm gonna mess it up. But we're gonna grow this one here. It's a yellow tomato. It's cherry style. And it says that this is a dwarf cherry variety. So it's gonna stay short, which is great. It's 70 days to harvest. I'm wondering if I should move this over into my dwarf tomatoes. I might do that. But the plant only gets 12 to 20 inches tall. I am definitely going to move it over to my dwarf tomatoes. It has low acidity to it, so it's more sweet than that traditional tomato taste, and it's yellow. I'm going to move this over to my dwarf tomatoes. The next one is also an old favorite, actually. This is an old favorite. Champagne Bubbles. I've grown this one now for 2 seasons. This will be the 3rd season that I'm growing the Champagne Bubbles. It's indeterminate, which most are. It's sweet, it's very sweet, and it kind of bubbles in your mouth. I mean, I can't explain it. The color is beautiful because it has this like yellowish color, and it gets lighter and lighter the longer you leave it on the vine. When I first grew it, I was harvesting too soon. If you let them soften up on the vine, they're delicious, and it gives you a burst of flavor every time you bite into one of these champagne bubbles. It also says that it's very disease resistant, and it can handle the heat when that heat gets really bad. Another one, last year was the first time that we grew it. It's called Camp Joy. Here's a better picture, Camp Joy. It's a 1-inch cherry style tomato. It's indeterminate. It usually comes in about mid-season, and it's 81 days to harvest. So you got some tomatoes that come in super early, like we used to call it the 4th of July or early girl style tomatoes, which usually means if you get it in the ground by the 4th of July, it's some of the first tomatoes that'll be ready. And then you got some that's more mid-season, around 80 days, and then you got some that are around 90 days. And I grow some of all of these, so that's why I normally don't talk about the time of season, because while some are coming in, some are kind of done for the season. I grow a variety, I don't talk about the season. I'll give you the number of days to harvest on the ones that I can give it to you on. But anyway, we'll be doing Camp Joy. We will also do Cluj Yellow. Here's a picture of it, Cluj Yellow. And I will be growing these specifically, the Camp Joy, Cluj Yellow, and some of the other tomatoes that I have here are specific because I know Grandpa likes them. There's a family friend, and my girls call him Grandpa, and he likes this particular tomato. I grow this one for him. I like to see all the different colors of the tomatoes when I'm growing them. But Cluj is a cherry style tomato. It's yellow. It did really well in the garden, just to be honest with you. And it says it's a yellow tomato, but it had more of an orange color to it. It reminded me of a sun gold, but it didn't burst open in the heat or after it rained. So it was more of an orangish yellowish color, and it did really well. And the last one from a cherry standpoint is Rosella. Rosella is the name of it. A lot of gourmet chefs like this one. It says it was bred for the superior flavor. It says it's a massive, so you're going to definitely need to stake all of these. It's a pinkish purple cherry style tomato, smoky blush. They're about 1/2-inch size fruit. It says they're good for fresh or cooked. It's just new. We wanted to try some new cherry style tomatoes. That's it from a cherry style tomato standpoint. I'm going to next move in to what I call my dwarf tomatoes. Dwarf tomatoes can be determinate, indeterminate, semi-determinate. Determinate means puts all the fruit on at one time, so you can get a big flushing of fruit, and then it'll pretty much stop producing fruit. And then you might get 1 or 2 here or there. I mean, it doesn't just stop. Some of them don't anyway. Semi-determinate means that It's not going to put a big flushing on it. It might put a big one on all at once, but then you're going to get onesie, twosies, threesies the rest of the season. So it's not going to just stop on you. But the indeterminate, which we've already talked about, it will continue to produce all season long. And when I can tell you the difference between them, I definitely will. Most of my dwarf tomatoes come from Tomato Fest, and the link will be below in the description. I am not an affiliate or anything like that. I just heard about the Dwarf Tomato Project, and I wanted to grow tomatoes in my GreenStalks. And to grow 24 tomatoes in such a small space, I wanted to limit the size of my plants so that I could make sure that they didn't become a jungle in my GreenStalk. I decided to put all dwarf tomatoes in my GreenStalk. And I went online and I found Tomato Fest. And they are part of the Dwarf Tomato Project group, team, whatever it is. And that's where I found my dwarf tomatoes, Tomato Fest. And I'm not an affiliate. The seeds have done really well for me. Let's talk a little bit about the Tomato Fest dwarf seeds. The first one that we'll talk about is Brandy Fred, and you'll see that Tomato Fest doesn't give you a picture of the tomato, but I have a picture right here for you. For the Brandy Fred tomato, it's a 10 to 16 ounce purple tomato. And you're going to find pretty quickly here that all of my dwarf plants, except for that new one that I just told you about, that yellow cherry, all of my dwarf plants are beefsteak style tomatoes. Everything is going to be at least 8 ounces and above because I like the big tomatoes. I want one tomato to be able to slice and one slice make a sandwich. And yes, I like tomato sandwiches. If you've never heard of a tomato sandwich, here's a picture of one. Yes, I took a picture of my tomato sandwich from last season. It's just mayonnaise, salt and pepper, and tomatoes. Who needs any kind of deli meat when your sandwich looks this good? But anyway, back to the tomatoes. So Brandy Fred just did okay for me. It wasn't bad. It wasn't great. It was just okay. And I had an issue with my GreenStalk this past season. I let it roll off of the sidewalk and I lost probably half of my plants in one of my GreenStalks. It's not fair to say that it didn't do well when I let it roll off the sidewalk. So we're definitely going to grow it again. I have lots of dwarf tomatoes here, so we'll try it again and we'll see how it does. The next dwarf tomato is Chocolate Lightning. Here's the picture of it. It's an 8 ounce tomato and it has green and gold jagged stripes in it. That's probably where it gets the lightning from. It's a good tomato. It grew well for me and it has an excellent taste. And I either have Chocolate Lightning or Tasmanian Chocolate 1 growing right now downstairs in my indoor grow space. Good tomato, we'll see how it does. The next one is Dwarf Beauty King. Here's the picture, 12 ounce indeterminate tomato, and it's red with the gold stripes. This one, I'm gonna be honest with you, has not done great. Beauty King has not done great for me. We're gonna keep trying though. We'll give it at least one pocket and see how it does in my GreenStalk. The next one is called Dwarf Golden Gypsy. Here's the picture. And I like to mix up the colors. Tomatoes don't just have to be red. Let's get some different colors. And this is one thing you can't do by going to the grocery store. You only get typical standard tomatoes. You get to play with so many different varieties and different strains of tomatoes when you grow them yourself. For this Golden Gypsy, it's an 8 to 18 ounce tomato. So the smallest size is 8 ounces, but it can get up to over a pound. It's yellow on the outside, but it has a pale flesh on the inside. I tried to grow this one last year, and it's one of the ones that I lost in my GreenStalk, so I didn't get to really experience that tomato. The next one is, I'm gonna let you read it because I can't pronounce it. And since I can't pronounce that, you got to read it. And here's a picture of it right here. This one is an indeterminate as well. It's kind of a blackish orangish tomato, and it's 6 to 12 ounces. It grew very well for me last year as well. It's a good one. We're also going to do Summer Sweet Gold, and here it is right there. 6 to 18 ounces is the true beef steak that we're looking for, and it's an indeterminate tomato. I think this one did well for me. I might be getting this one mixed up with another one, but I think this one did well. They started coming in much later in the season than some of my other plants. I had a couple plants that I didn't destroy when I lost my GreenStalk, and they came in later in the season than anything else. But they may have come in later because it took them a minute to bounce back from the damage. We're going to do Hannah's Prize. Here's the picture of Hannah's Prize. 6 to 12 ounces. This one did really well the year before last. So last year, it did okay. It didn't do bad. But 2 years ago, this one was on point. It had a great taste. It had a little tartness to it, which made it a little different from a flavor standpoint, but it was delicious and it produced very well. Hannah Prize. Purple Heart is next. It's a 6 to 16 ounce tomato, has a heart shape to it. It's more of a purple black tomato. It did okay, not bad, it did okay. I wouldn't say it was my favorite dwarf tomato, but it did well enough for me to decide to grow it again this upcoming season. Wild Spud Leaf is a 12 ounce purple kind of tomato. And this one has potato leaves on the plant itself. It did really well 2 years ago. And again, I lost a ton of my dwarf tomatoes last year. I want to be fair. I don't want to say they had a bad year. No, I had a bad year. It did really well 2 years ago. So I'm assuming it's going to do well this upcoming season. We're going to do Rosella Crimson and a Rosella Purple. I'm going to put both of them up here for you at the same time, one on each side. The Rosella Crimson is a 13 ounce pink determinate tomato, where the Rosella Purple is a 12 ounce indeterminate deep purple tomato. Very similar from how they look standpoint, but one is a deeper purple, one's pink, one's indeterminate, one's determinate, and I think both of them have a really nice taste. Sweet Scarlet Dwarf, medium to large size tomato, and it has an intense flavor. And I'm talking about all these weird colored tomatoes, right? All these different colors, but you got to have some red ones too. So here's my red tomato, an intense flavor. I grew it last year, I believe, for the first time. Tasty Wine, 12 ounce pink indeterminate tomato. Tasty Wine was very tasty. It did really well for me a couple of years ago. It was very productive for me as well. Decent sized tomatoes, not as big as a beefsteak as I would like, but the size was decent. It wasn't too small. The new Big Dwarf. This is supposed to be a 1 pound tomato, and it should be a deep pink in color. I honestly couldn't tell you because 2 years ago, they all died. They got some kind of disease and then they all died. This past year, most of them were in the tower that I lost, that fell off the patio or off of the walkway. I didn't get any again. So that's 2 seasons in a row that I didn't really get any of this new Big Dwarf. Since last year wasn't their fault, we're going to try one more time. If it doesn't do well for me this last time, we're going to put this one to the side and we're going to grow something else. But now we're going to get to my favorite tomato. This one is considered a bush steak. It doesn't necessarily fit in the dwarf tomato project. It's from Burpee's. It's called bush steak. It is a determinate tomato. So it's going to put everything on pretty much at one time, and then it's going to kind of peter out. And usually they put them on, it says 65 days to harvest, but I have found that these tomatoes take a little longer to get started. And it says that it's on a dwarf plant that's only 20 to 24 inches tall. And usually from a dwarf standpoint, that's what we're talking about a 2-foot plant. Once you get above 2, maybe 3 feet, then in my mind, that's a full-size plant. It's an 8 to 12 ounce tomato, if I hadn't said that already. That's all of my dwarf tomatoes. They will all go in my GreenStalk vertical planter. And yes, you can grow tomatoes in your GreenStalks. You just have to choose the right varieties. And if you want to grow a full-size indeterminate tomato in your GreenStalk, you can do that. You just have to have the right type of staking and trellising and that kind of stuff. You can grow anything you want in your GreenStalks. I prefer dwarf plants, 2, 3 feet tall max, and I can put something in all 6 pockets. And yes, I do harvest tomatoes. Here's a picture of one of my GreenStalks with all dwarf plants in it over the years. So if you're really interested in growing tomatoes in your GreenStalks, it's possible. And here's some examples of them. All right, we're going to move on to the next type. The next type of tomatoes are paste style tomatoes for me. And when I say paste style tomatoes, I'm not necessarily talking about a big beef steak, because those are real meaty as well. But in my mind, your paste style tomatoes are the ones that you want to use to make sauces with. They have very small seed cavities and they're meaty. So it's a combination of things. Now, do all of these really fit in the paste category? Maybe not, but they do for me. All right, one of the first ones that we will be growing is Big Mama. Here's a picture of Big Mama, and it's from Burpee's, and it used to be my favorite paste tomato. It used to be. It is no longer my favorite paste tomato, but Big Mama, here it is right here. It's about 80 days to harvest. It's indeterminate, and yes, you're going to have to stake these. Now, the tomatoes I'm talking about now are tomatoes basically from here on out that I am going to be growing on cattle panel trellis. They're all indeterminate tomatoes, but these just happen to be paste style. So Big Mama, I use these definitely for canning, but I use all of my tomatoes for canning. I don't show any favorites. They all going to get canned up. And I'll throw them all in a salad as well, but Big Mama. But the one that took Big Mama's place as my all-time favorite paste tomato is the Super Sauce. And it's a hybrid, as is the Big Mama. Big Mama's a hybrid as well. This tomato, y'all, for real, this tomato gets huge. Here's a picture of it. It's also from Burpee's. Some of the fruits can weigh in at 2 pounds. 2 pounds. I mean, one of these big sauce tomatoes will fill up a half pint size jar for sure. And you can't get 2 in a pint jar. They're just that big. It says they can get up to 5.5 inches tall and 5 inches wide. Now, I haven't seen one that large, but I've seen some really nice size ones. They were one of my first paste tomatoes to come in. They were 70 days, is what it says on the pack here. And it was one of the first tomatoes that came in for me to enjoy. It's seedless. It says seedless sauce. I can't remember if it had any seeds in it or not, but I don't remember a lot of seeds. But in my mind, that's what makes it into the paste family, is because of the small seed cavity. The next one that did really well for me last year, and we're going to grow it again, is the Opałka, if I'm saying it correctly. It's a Polish heirloom. This tomato came in and it wouldn't stop. I mean, it was so prolific, and that was one of the reasons why I liked it. It's very disease resistant. That might have a reason why it did so well in my garden, but it was also the tomato that the hornworm got on and wouldn't let go of. Nice tomato, Opałka. And it has some little green stripes on it as well, but beautiful tomato, and it has that acidic traditional tomato taste. Now we're going to try to grow Italian heirloom. This did really well for me a couple of years ago, and then, or 3 years ago now. Last year, it didn't do well. So I purchased Italian heirloom from another company, I believe that those seeds were mislabeled because that was not an Italian heirloom, at least not what I thought Italian heirloom was supposed to look like. So we're going to go back to this company from an Italian heirloom, Fruition Seeds. It's a 75 to 80 day harvest, of course, indeterminate. And it says that this is tolerant of late blight. It should be able to get around some of those diseases that your tomato plants get late in the year. Hopefully, I can have luck with this one in this upcoming season. Another one that I grew for the first time this year, which by the way, I loved, and I'm going to grow it again, is this Korean long. It was an amazing, amazing pepper, or excuse me, tomato, an amazing tomato. It says that it's an 85 to 90 day tomato and it has a unique taste. I'm going to be honest with you. This thing was so big. I mean, this thing was huge. I sliced it onto sandwiches and into salads. I mean, it had an excellent flavor. It was very meaty. Maybe I shouldn't even be putting this one in my paste variety because of its long shape. I still think it's the right place. It says here that it's a productive, reliable, crack-resistant paste tomato. See, that's where it needs to be. And it says the size of these can range from 6 to 14 ounces. Korean long, like I said, did very well, and we will grow it again. And then I got one new paste tomato. I like to try something new pretty much in all of my different varieties every year to see if I'm going to put something on a shelf or pull something back out or try something new. And the new one for me this year is Golden King of Siberia. It's a yellow heart-shaped tomato. It can get up to 1 pound. It says that it's a nicely balanced, sweet taste. The flesh is smooth and creamy. Since it's heart-shaped, I'm going to assume that I can add this one to my paste tomato group, just so we can kind of mix up the colors for my paste tomatoes. I told y'all I got a lot of tomatoes. We're going through 60 different tomatoes today. So now we're going to move on over into our slicer tomatoes. So these are just slicers, and these are slicers that are more red in color. If it's not red, I'm putting it in another section. For the red slicing tomatoes, there are 3 that I will not grow this year, and I didn't grow them last year. I put all 3 of these on the shelf. One of these 3 I got as a volunteer plant, so I grew it whether I wanted to or not. We're going to put these back on the shelf again. The Giant Crimson, which MIGardener brought back a couple seasons ago. It's a nice tasting tomato, it's just not giant. And I like large slicing tomatoes. This one was supposed to be 8 to 10 ounces, and they said sometimes close to 1 pound. I found them to be very small. We will not be growing the Giant Crimson this year, but it might be one that you're interested in. Like I said, it had a great taste. It was a little shaped weird, but it's supposed to be shaped weird. We will not be growing that one this upcoming season. We will not be growing the Abe Lincoln either. This one didn't grow well for me 2 years ago. The size wasn't that great. Even though it said it could get up to 1 pound, it didn't. The Abe Lincoln is supposed to be a nicely shaped tomato. It's something that you would find very commonly in the grocery stores and stuff because of its perfect shape. But we won't be growing that one this year. Good acidity level, regular tomato leaves, perfect slicing tomato. Just didn't do well for me, so we're going to put it back on the shelf unless I change my mind, which I've been known to do. One of the issues, well, here, let me finish with this last one. Seeger is the last one that I will not be growing this upcoming season. It is a red, I think it's a salette, isn't it? It is a salette, 4-ounce fruit, indeterminate, and is resistant to late blight, which should keep it producing into your first frost. The reason why I'm not growing Seeger is because it's only 4 ounces. I might as well just eat a cherry tomato and save that spot in my garden for a big slicing tomato. But this is the one that came up and volunteered for me. So I still got some Seeger tomatoes this past season. It had a great taste, nothing bad. It's an earlier tomato, 55 days to harvest. So it's an early tomato, gets you in quick. It's semi-determinate, so you don't get a whole bunch at any one time, a little bit over time. You will not be growing Seeger. Now, I won't change my mind on that one. One of the issues is that I've gotten so into the massive varieties of tomatoes, and I'm going through 60 to the point where those big red slicers, I don't have that many big red slicers anymore because I have the purples and the blacks and the yellows and the orange and the greens and the whites and the pinks. So I'm going to have to think about how I'm going to handle my red slicers going forward. Most of my big beefsteak tomatoes, most of them, y'all, are from Burpees. I'll just be honest with you. Burpees seems to be my go-to for good quality beefsteak red slicers. So one of the first ones I want to share with you is the super beef steak. And these are older seeds. I'm bringing this one in off the shelf because I need more red beefsteaks. So we're bringing this one back. It's an improved beefsteak type with bigger yields. And it's supposed to be up to 1 pound. So we're going to try to bring it back and see if we can get more beefsteaks. I'm also bringing back my giant Belgium pink. I'll find a picture for you because there isn't one on the pack. Pink is close to red, so I'll take it. I got to try to get more red varieties in here. I haven't grown this one in a very long time, and I don't remember how it tasted. Bodacious, Burpees, hybrid. And I believe this is exclusively from Burpees, I believe, if I remember correctly. And it's a 10 to 12 ounce fruit. I make sandwiches with it, y'all. I just like it. And it doesn't crack like some of your tomatoes do. It's a no cracking kind of tomato. It's good for sandwiches, burgers, salads. It's good for everything. And it says it can yield between 8 to 10 fruit a week. Y'all, that's a lot. When I'm growing over 100 tomato plants, 8 to 10 a week just off of this one plant, I'll be in trouble if that's the case. Another Burpee's favorite for me is steak sandwich. Steak sandwich. Steak sandwich has done the best for me from a beefsteak standpoint than any other red tomato in my garden. So I went back and I looked at videos. Steak sandwich did well this season for sure, as well as last season. Every time I went to get a beefsteak red tomato in the garden, oh, steak sandwich. It was always steak sandwich. It says it's a large 10-ounce fruit, perfect size slicers, of course, and it had the traditional tomato taste, which is what I love. 70 days to harvest on that one. The next one for me is Delicious, and here's a picture of Delicious. I got mine from Burpees, but I know you can get it from multiple places. It's a 1 pound average size fruit as well. It says some of them can reach 2 pounds. And I remember my Delicious tomatoes getting very large in the garden. It's 77 days to harvest. It's an extra delicious flavor. And Delicious was delicious. Steak House, another Burpees tomato plant for me is Steak House. It says up to 3 pounds. It's supposed to be the biggest tomato ever bred with true heirloom tomato flavor. And you can harvest it in 75 to 80 days. Now, I've never grown a 3-pound tomato. And Steakhouse just does okay in my garden. So I can't say I've grown a 3-pound Steakhouse tomato. It is a hybrid. It's not an heirloom tomato. But I'm going to plant it and maybe I'll get that 3-pound tomato this year. Just maybe. And then we're going to do another Burpees. This is the last Burpees, and then I got some other ones here. We're going to do the Burpees Super Steak Hybrid. This one is an 80-day to harvest, and the fruits average 1 to 2 pounds. Y'all can see what I'm trying to do. I want the big ones, right? It's supposed to be a superior flavor. and it's a smooth textured tomato, so a beautiful shape. And I mean, the meaty center, that looks pretty good to me. The next one I'm going to try to bring back is Brandy Wise from Fruition Seeds. I didn't grow it this past season. I put it on the shelf. I'm going to pull it off the shelf. And it's supposed to be great for late blight and septorial resistance, which is really a big problem in my part of the country. And I didn't grow it this past season. Maybe if I had, maybe I'd have gotten a few more tomatoes, even though I got plenty. Don't get me wrong. I got plenty of tomatoes. It's supposed to give me a large slicing tomato. It had excellent taste. Excellent taste. Brandy Wise. This next one is Thornburg's Terracotta. I got this as a free seed from Baker's Creek. I planted it 2 years ago and it did okay. It wasn't a bad tomato. I didn't plant it last year, I don't believe. This is as close to red as I can get with the red beef style tomatoes that I have. It has that honey brown skin and it's supposed to be an excellent tasting tomato. I'm gonna be honest with you, I don't remember how it tasted, but it was a pretty tomato. And the last beefsteak that I'm gonna grow is the true beefsteak, or some people call it the Fiji improved. This tomato is about 4 to 5 inches in diameter. So it's supposed to be a pretty big tomato. It has a maroon or brownish purple flesh with a red center. And it says, due to the heavy fruit, you definitely need to steak this. Well, I'm definitely going to steak it. And it's a true beefsteak. And that's it from the beefsteak group of tomatoes. And we're going to move on to what I call specialty tomatoes. When I say specialty tomatoes, I am talking about anything other than red. Most of these for me are going to be beefsteak. Actually, all of these are beefsteak style tomatoes. Big slicing tomatoes, they just aren't red. One of my favorite tomatoes in this group of tomatoes was the Paul Robeson. I tried to grow this tomato 2 years ago. I got my transplant. I got everything I needed to put into the garden, but I put it in a bad spot that didn't get enough sunlight. And then, believe it or not, my cantaloupe shaded it out and it never grew anything. But last year I moved it to a different area and it did amazing. It had a smoky taste to it, a 7 to 12 ounce slicing tomato, a beautiful tomato though. It was absolutely beautiful and delicious. And then I will be growing a Brandywine Black. And it's been around since the 1920s. It's also good in sauces, in salsa and sauces. I cook everything together, y'all. When it's time to make my sauce, whatever tomatoes coming in, that's what I'm going to make my sauce with. And when I put a whole bunch of these really deep purple, black tomatoes in with the red tomatoes, it gives me such a rich color, a deep red sauce. It's beautiful, beautiful. It's going to have that Brandywine heirloom flavor. The next one that I'm going to grow, interesting enough, the picture on the next two are the same. So let me just show you that. For these two right here, same picture, but one is black from Tula and one is the black Krim. The black Krim is 80 days to harvest. It's a beautiful, by the way, a beautiful tomato. It's got some of those heirloom kind of shapes to it, if that's really the right picture for it. Had a great taste. Had a little smoky taste to it, and it was sweet. Originally, that one was crossed with a beefsteak and a Cherokee purple, and that's how the black Krim came to be. Black from Tula is a 75 to 80 day indeterminate, and it's a deep burgundy color, has a low acid taste to it, so it's more sweet than that traditional tomato taste. It didn't do so well for me in my garden this past season. I didn't have it in a great spot. So we're going to give it another try, and we're going to compare these two again to figure out which one has the wrong picture. And so then we're going to get to my Cherokee Purple. Y'all, I love Cherokee Purple. This tomato did amazing, amazing, amazing. It's a Cherokee Indian heirloom. Beautiful, deep, dark, purple, pink, traditional tomato flavor and taste. And when I want a tomato sandwich, y'all, this is the one I prefer because I like that acidity that tomatoes have. The next one, I'm going to do a true black brandy wine. And a lot of these black tomatoes look very similar, and the taste is very similar as well. It's supposed to be an extra large fruit. Mine weren't, but they were still really good. More of an earthy, sweet flavor, maybe smoky taste. I don't know. It's a good tomato. And then I'm going to do a Black Beauty, which is my last black tomatoes. And if you notice, we went from a deep red all the way down into the black from a color standpoint. Black Beauty is probably the darkest tomato I have. The more the sun hits the tomato, the darker the hues will be. If you put it in just the right spot, you can almost get a fully black tomato. And I'm not talking about a GMO tomato. I'm talking about heirlooms. And if you know Baker Creek, they only deal, well, I thought they only dealt with heirlooms, but I think I read something different a while back. But anyway, Black Beauty. I found these tomatoes, though, to be a little smaller than like the true black brandy wine and the Cherokee Purple. They put all their fruit on, and I got quite a few fruit at one time, and it kind of held on for most of the season. So that's it for the black tomatoes. And now I'm going to move into my yellow and orange tomatoes. So I have Drusba from Tomato Fest. Here's a picture of Drusba. 80 days, and it's only 6 to 8 ounces. And that's a little smaller than I like to grow, but these were free seeds for me because Grandpa got them for me, or Grandpa's daughter got them for me. And so this isn't a seed I would have purchased because the tomato size was only 6 to 8 ounces. But I planted it last year, and this tomato did amazing. Compared to the other tomatoes around it, it outshined all of them. And it had a really good taste as well. So even though it was small, and I know 6 to 8 ounces isn't small, but in my book, that's small because I want them a lot bigger than that. But it was mighty, a mighty tomato, so mighty that it's going right back into my garden this year. And then I'm going to do Kellogg's Breakfast. A lot of people plant this one as well. It's a good tomato. I find it to be very sweet. I find all of the yellow and orange tomatoes to be very sweet with very low acid. Those are not my favorite tomatoes, not for a tomato sandwich. Great for a salad and great for making sauces, even though it gives everything this really orange color versus that deep red that people are used to seeing. Produced very well in my garden. These next 3 are so similar. I'm going to show you all 3 at once, and then we'll talk about them. The pineapple, the big rainbow, and the hillbilly. 80, 90, and 85 to 90 days. So let's put it this way. Pineapple, 80 days. Hillbilly, 85 to 90. And then the big rainbow is 90 days. That's the big rainbow there. But they're all very similar. Let's talk about them. The pineapple was very prolific, by the way. It did really, really well in my garden. The tomatoes can be up to 2 pounds, and I found that the pineapples were really nice size tomatoes, very nice size. And it says that it has kind of like a citrus flavor, which I would agree with. It wasn't just sweet, it did have kind of a citrusy flavor to it, so I agree with that. Hillbilly was the 85 to 90 days, 1 to 3 pound tomatoes, and y'all, they're right. This was a big tomato, and it's not the prettiest shaped tomato, but it was really good. Super sweet though, not a lot of acidity. I personally didn't like it on burgers. Because I like that traditional tomatoes taste. But I mean, it was good, super sweet. And then the big rainbow is the third one of the group. It's 90 days. So if you notice, they're going to start coming in and it's going to be like a succession, right? It's going to start coming in and then it's going to end with the big rainbow out of the three. This one can get between 1 and 2 pounds. Again, really big. It says that they're more disease resistant than other bicolor tomatoes. And I did find that my orange and yellow tomatoes did better than my black tomatoes. So I don't know. Could be good. Could just be where I had it in the garden too. Oh, the other thing that's interesting about the big rainbow, that stripe that you see on the outside, you see that all the way through this tomato. So when you cut into it, it looks the same way on the inside as it does on the outside. Dr. Whitey's yellow is next up, 1 pound. Kind of a tangerine orange color tomato. Some people say Whitey's, some people say Witchies. I don't know how you say it, but y'all know what I'm talking about. Sweet flavor, more of a fruity flavor for this particular Dr. Whitey's tomato. Now, the tomato that gave me my largest fruit of the year was Orange Jazz. And it was also the most prolific specialty tomato that I put in the garden. I only had 2 plants. But once they start putting the fruit on, y'all, I had one tomato was like the size of my face. It was huge. Last year was the first time I ever grew Orange Jazz, and it did amazing. It says that later planting and drip irrigations are recommended to prevent blight and leaf septoria. Now, I didn't have any issues with blight on these tomatoes. I mean, they did so well. The only thing about this is that it was so fruity and sweet that I didn't even feel like I was eating a tomato. I mean, I know a tomato is fruit. I get it. I almost felt like I was eating an orange. Okay, it doesn't taste like an orange. That's not what I'm saying, but it had a fruity taste to it. It came in, I had so many of these. So if you like super sweet, fruity tomatoes, this is the one for you. Nice, large, slicing, beefsteak style tomatoes. The next two are my Brandywine Yellow, and I don't have a picture of my Brandywine Yellow, but you saw my Brandywine Black. You've seen my, I think, pink Brandywine, I think is another one I have in there. Same thing, Brandywine, that heirloom taste, it's just a yellow tomato, and it should be a larger, at least 1 pound tomato, big slicing tomato. And then the last one is called the Great White. I got it from Tomato Fest. Here's a picture of the Great White. Now, it's not really a white tomato. I mean, it's a really, 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 really light green tomato. I only had one plant that made it. I believe I gave all the rest of them away or sold them at my yard sale, if I remember correctly. But I only had one plant that I put in my garden, and I believe I got 1 tomato off that plant, maybe 2. I might have got 2. So it's an open pollinated tomato variety. I hear that it's hard to find according to this. I don't know a lot about this one because I only got 1 or 2. So hopefully we'll get more of that Great White this year, and I'll be able to give you more information on the Great White. So I have black, I have orange, I have red, I have white, I have pink, I have yellow. We got some of everything from the rainbow, right? Well, there are 2 more plants that I want to talk about, and then we're going to call this good. And these 2 plants aren't really tomatoes, but they don't fit anything else. So I'm going to put them in my tomato video here. One is the ground cherry. I grew 2 different varieties of this last year. New Hanover was one, and I don't remember the name of the other one. But we're not growing them this year. We're not growing them. I had 2 plants, 1 of each. They both did well. It's a very different taste Only one other person in the home even ate them besides myself. The only people who enjoyed the ground cherry tomato or ground cherry, well, I'm saying tomato, but they look like tomatoes, was the squirrels. And they put them everywhere. I got these plants coming up everywhere. And I intentionally put them in one area trying to contain them because I heard they will take over the garden. Well, with the help of the squirrels, I'm going to be growing them anyway, whether I want to or not. Ground cherry. They have a sweetness to them, but it was so different from a regular tomato, and it was so different from a cherry that I couldn't get my family to get into them. So we tried it. We had fun. I don't plan to grow it anymore, but thanks to the squirrels, I will be. And then the last one that I will be growing is a tomatillo. I did not grow tomatillos this past season because I got so many tomatillos 2 years ago that I still have green salsa verde from my tomatillos from 2 years ago. My stock and my supply is getting low, so I am going to grow the Grande Rio Verde tomatillo. It's a larger tomatillo, so I don't take so many when I'm ready to make my salsa verde. One thing about your tomatillos, you can't grow just one plant. So if you want to grow them, you want to give it a try, you're going to have to grow at least 2 plants. At least 2 plants if you want to get a harvest. So let me start there. So don't plant just 2 because one of them might not survive. You need to plant at least 3 in order to make sure you're going to have 2 plants. I usually plant about between 4 and 6 plants when I do plant my tomatillos, and then I'm usually overrun with tomatillos, and then they coming up the next year. But we are going to replant tomatillos for this upcoming season. Whew. Y'all, that's 60 tomatoes or specialty plants. We got through it. And of 60, there's only 4 in here that I'm not planning on growing this year. So we're still going to have a lot of tomato varieties. And some of these, we might be growing them whether we want to or not because they will volunteer in the garden. But that's the 60 tomatoes. I know this video was much longer than part 1, but I had to put the tomatoes by themselves. And even though I talked about 60 varieties, I probably have another 20 or 30 varieties that we didn't talk about that we're not growing this year. If you enjoyed this type of information, please give me a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel. Part 3 is just on the many different types of lettuce that I'll be growing this year. Stay tuned, part 3 is coming. So until next time, and I hope there will be a next time that you decide to hang out with me, Kim, at Kim's Cozy Corner. Talk to you soon. Bye.